Good evening and welcome again to Ideas at Work and Beyond. From time to time we're going to look into the Bible, and it seems like in these rough economic times when there's difficulties in the economy, there's difficulty and unrest with jobs, people are struggling to just make ends meet, it feels as if there's a real storm that's come through individuals' lives, come through entire communities. People are hurting bad. And some of the things that people counted on in the past, having that nice house, having that big job, having that money put away, for some, a lot of that stuff is gone. Jesus said in the Bible, it says, "Therefore, everyone who hears my word, these words of mine, and acts upon them, he may be compared to the wise man who has built his house upon the rock. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and burst against the house, yet it did not fall, for it had been founded upon the rock. And everyone who hears my words of mine and does not act upon them is like the fool, or the foolish man who built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and burst against the house, and it fell, and great was its fall." Tonight on Ideas at Work and Beyond, we are privileged to have a local minister of God from New Hope Baptist Church. The Reverend Ivan Pitts is joining us. We have tried for years to get this man on the show, and he's finally joined us. And I know for Reverend Pitts, those words mean a lot.
Yes.
Because there have been some storms, but you tell people, I've seen you on YouTube, I've heard you preach, you tell people to build their life on the rock, and that's a little bit what we want to talk about. But first, thank you very much for joining us. And Al is with us the whole show. How long have we been trying to get Reverend Pitts on? How long?
Been a little while.
All right.
But we have him here tonight.
All right. Al, you had some questions for him, too.
Yeah, well, before we get into the black church and the role church plays in the African American community, or the society in general, let me just have a little background info on yourself. Tell me about your background and how you became a minister and how you came to New Hope Baptist Church.
Okay. I have been at New Hope Baptist Church for 7 years now. I became a minister kicking and screaming. If you were to ask me of all the occupations or vocations that I would have chosen, being a minister would have been at the very bottom of the list.
So in your high school yearbook, you weren't most likely to become a pastor?
No, I was actually most likely to seek a pastor's advice. No, I think that one must recognize that work in the church, work as a pastor is a calling. It's not something you volunteer for. It's something that God calls you, and you have to respond. And sometimes we respond late, and sometimes we fight the call, but it is a response to a call from God.
Right now, the New Hope Baptist Church has been around in Danbury for a very long time. So for people who don't really know the history of the church, can you tell us a little bit about the church itself?
Sure.
And the history, and based upon the history of Danbury, because it has a rich history.
Oh, the history of New Hope Baptist Church is incredible. It's 114 years old. It was founded by a group of migrants who migrated from the South, in particular Virginia, looking for work in the factories here in Danbury. And it was those, what they called at that time, Negro or colored people looking for new opportunities, new work, new land, and they founded New Hope. And so that's what New Hope is all about, giving hope to those who are seeking better lives.
Right. Now, another thing about black churches that people always come to me like, there's a Baptist church and there's an AME church. Now, I did a little bit of research.
Okay.
There's basically 7 major types of black churches. You have the American Methodist Episcopal AME Church. You have the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. The Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. And then you have the National Baptist Convention, which branches off with 2 churches branches off of that, which is the National Baptist Convention of America, and the Progressive
Baptist
National Baptist Convention. Then last but not least, you have the Church in Christ.
Yep.
Could you basically tell us, briefly, what are the major differences between those churches?
There are two major differences between those churches. One is going to be the history and how they were founded.
Right.
The other is how they are structured, or what they call the polity, how they govern themselves. Some of those churches, the AME Zion Church, they have bishops who are kind of the overseer and they give instruction. And the Baptist Church is autonomous. Each congregation determines how it's governed. So those are really the primary differences. We have similar missions, we have similar community ties, and we are very much community activist churches.
Now we have New Hope Baptist Church here. And what other churches of African American descent do we have in the area here?
Oh, we have quite a few. You have Victory Christian Center, you have Trinity Christian Tabernacle, you have St. James AME, you have Mount Pleasant AME Zion, and you have several others that are in this area. New Bethel Church of God in Christ is one as well. So those are some of the, off the top of my head, some of the local historically black churches in this community.
Well, yeah, I mean, I found it very interesting. I mean, when we're tonight's topic is the black church, you know, and the history of the black church. And when you look at the history, you know, sometimes, I guess from the white perspective, you could say, now, wait a minute. What's all this mixing of politics and the church? That just doesn't seem right. You know what I'm saying? And really, when I begin to look into some of the history of it, really, initially, the church was the only completely African-American run structure in the community. And so any issues that came up, political or otherwise, that was your voice, that was your defense, that was your ability to, you know, make an impact on the society. And I'm going back 200 years now. So it seems like there's been a national transition. So you have, you know, people like Jesse Jackson, people like Martin Luther King. I know you had Al Sharpton that spoke at your church about a year ago. I actually watched the whole sermon. It was really pretty good. He talked about, you know, keep hope alive, and he sort of transitioned from hope into faith. And he preached out of the Bible and what that meant. That was like, you know, supercharged hope. I mean, hope's kind of just sort of a nebulous concept, but he was saying having faith in a God who delivers, and a God you can count on. And I thought his sermon was interesting when he talked about, they had a New York Times writer that had said, we want to do a big, you know, thing. We want to follow you around for a week. And at the end of the week, Al Sharpton said, okay, well, today we're going to church. Well, I don't know about that. I've never been to a church. Well, you need to, if you want to know about me, you need to be at church on Sunday. But talk a little bit about that, some of the history of the black church and how, you know, it's unique when compared with a suburban white church, for example.
It's important to understand that regardless of whether it's an AME church or a Baptist church or Church of God in Christ, that the black church was founded out of rebellion, out of rebelling against the ills of society. For example, the Methodist church, or the AME church, if you will, blacks were not allowed to worship inside the same church. They had to actually stand outside the windows, and they would hold the windows open, and they would get the gospel through the windows. And so it was out of a rebellion of being God's child or God's children that they wanted to have a holistic experience of the Word of God. And so when there were injustices as it relates to school and employment and things of that nature, what entity was totally separate from society, completely owned by the people? It was the black church. And so that's how the black church has its roots in community service, and we're still very much involved in politics. You take Brown versus the Board of Education. That is very much an effort of churches coming together to support educational rights. The political process cannot be separated from our faith, because what is decided in the political arena affects us on a day-to-day basis.
No, I think, like I was saying, with Martin Luther King, with some of the civil rights movements, right up until, you know, today. I mean, even, I know you don't want to talk too much about politics or anything like that, but you can't help but see, you know, something as simple. Not simple. It's a vital, important issue. But I think about a year ago at the carnival, there was some of the police. Allegedly, there was an issue where they were roughing up some minorities, and where does the community turn? Who's their spokesman? Who's their voice? You know, it's the black church in the community.
Doesn't a parent have the right to ask a question? If you sent your child to school and your child came home with a missing tooth,
Yeah.
don't you have the right to go back to the authorities of that school and say, hey, what happened to my son or my daughter's tooth? It's the same thing that happened with the carnival, the same thing that happens across the country. When something seems funny, you ask questions. I don't think there's any shame in asking questions and getting answers and holding people accountable to how they treat individuals. I think that is our right and that is our responsibility.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that situation was handled properly. I think in your case, you were a voice, an advocate for the community. Likewise, and this is getting more into it with some of the issues where there were some racist emails. This was in the previous political cycle. Again, that needed to be addressed. And looking into it, it seemed like you had first addressed it sort of behind closed doors, and there wasn't satisfaction at that point, so it became an issue. But apparently it was a valid issue because people were concerned about it, and I think it was properly handled.
I think it goes back to what we said just a few minutes ago. You have to ask the question. You know, we're not chasing after you know, TV cameras to be in front of cameras and things of that nature, even though we're in front of a camera now. But you have to ask the question. You have to hold people accountable. One of the greatest things in this American society is the ability to ask a question, the freedom of speech. And so if someone is sending racist emails, or someone is in a position of power and they look down on a certain group of people and they legislate with that bias, you have to be able to ask the question and hold people accountable.
And I can tell you from somebody who was born in the South, who has family in the South, I don't mean like the deep, deep South.
Whereabouts? What state? What are we talking about here?
In Tennessee, a little town like 50 miles outside of Memphis.
Okay.
You know, two things you can do: you pick strawberries, you pick cotton. And my family were doing that when I was born. So 1969, they were still picking cotton.
Okay.
You had Jim Crow laws. You had massive.
Was it a big town, a small town?
Small town.
Well, did they have railroad tracks going through it?
There was a railroad track right through the center.
Okay, was there one part of the tracks that certain people lived on, the other part of the...
still there.
And did they call it the quarters?
They called it the crossing.
The crossing, okay. That was my experience. I'm a product of the North. I grew up in Chicago, but when I would visit down south, it'd be like, man, talk about segregated. That was it. Anyways.
Well, Chicago's a whole another story too.
Yeah,
I got family in the South Side.
Okay.
But the big thing was, like, you had massive discrimination, but the one place where you can go to feel empowered was the church. You know, there was one place where Jim Crow laws did not apply. It was in the black church. It was a meeting ground. It was a place where you had a sense of empowerment, where you lived in a society where, you know, you were considered 3/5 of a human being in most cases. And the civil rights movement came out of there, and I think the church was a main factor in uplifting people and saying, you know, they took the lead in fighting against social injustices. And that's why I feel so great about the church. It means a lot to me. And it goes on right now. It hasn't changed. And I think that when you talk about the church is the biggest African-American owned meeting place. You know, I mean, African-Americans meet there in a huge numbers still to this day, and I think that's a good thing.
And it's a way in which we have an opportunity to express ourselves without being judged. In the boardroom, in the corporate boardroom, you can't shout and scream, and you know, you have to be reserved, you have to be focused. But in the worship arena, in the Sunday morning service, you can shout, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. You can express yourself. You can dance. You have an opportunity to be free. And oftentimes, W.B. Du Bois talked about there's a two-ness in black society. We have to act one way when we're in our professional environment, but we have an opportunity when we're in our home environment to act a different way, to be free. And so you have to understand those dynamics in order to be successful. I also want to talk about, as it relates to the black church, many of the historical black universities and colleges were founded out of the black church. The high schools and the educational institutions were founded in the black church. When we weren't able to be educated in the mainstream, we had to develop our own schools. We develop our own businesses, and that came from the black church. So the black church was an institution of social empowerment and social justice.
No, I think that's true. I think, and also, again, when you go way back, it was. I had a good friend who lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut, named Lorenzo Elder. I don't know, Lorenzo, you're still out there, but we talked a little bit, and he said, because I'm just a product of the pearly white suburbs, and that's been my background, and it is what it is. But he said, you got to understand culturally where I'm coming from. My people didn't come over here the way your people came over here. The whole concept of it takes a village to raise a child, the whole concept of the community and the extended family. You don't get that quite as much in the white community. You really don't. And I've had experience in both, but that sense of community, that sense of we're all in this together, you would obviously know better, but it seems like historically that was born out of nuclear families being broken up from the get-go, and needed a sense of community just to survive. And I think also the black church provides that an environment for that community to express itself.
But also I want to just make it very clear, the black church does not utilize our history as an excuse for being incompetent and not being professionals and not striving for excellence. We want to understand our history, but we're not a slave to our history. In spite of the history in this country, we have been able to achieve much. And so we don't sit back and use that as an excuse for not being an awesome individual or being all that we can be.
Okay, I hear what you're saying as far as that goes too. I mean, that, I think that I have a couple thoughts going through my mind. One is, like St. Augustine talked about the city of God and the city of man.
Right.
I think a little bit we're taking a look at the black church from a sort of secular, cultural, anthropological point of view. And what I'd like to pick your brain and heart on a little bit is sort of putting a spiritual overlay on that. That there's a difference within the black church, and the difference is this vital relationship with Jesus Christ. And that now, because of your relationship with Christ, your brothers and sisters in a church are just that. That you're a family, you're a body, you're an organism, not just an organization. Correct. Like the Rotary or the PTA or Correct. Something like that. Correct. And then the other thing, going to your point you just made, I think with Barack Obama in the White House, it has sort of rebooted this whole thing as far as achievement, accomplishment. Have we put racism behind us? What does this really mean? And you would know better than me, but I would like to throw out there on the table that if you have an African American as the highest elected official in the land, the most powerful man on the planet, then all of a sudden, what you were talking about, striving for excellence, seems much more achievable than maybe it looked like in the future. But maybe you could talk to, those are two big things, but I'll just throw it out there.
Well, Barack Obama is the President of the United States, not because he's black, but because he's excellent and outstanding.
Absolutely.
Because he's brilliant and he's bright, and he is what we need for this time. So that's why
apparently.
Well, that's what the
man was elected.
That's what the public says.
Absolutely.
So if you don't believe me, you can ask John McCain.
Yeah.
But there is a book written by James and Evelyn Whitehead, and it was called Methods of Ministry, and it talks about this triangle that informs our faith. So if you have a triangle, at the top of the triangle, it's our holy writings, our biblical teachings. And then in one side of the triangle, or at one corner of the triangle, it is our experiences. And then at the other side, it is our culture, our society. And you take what you believe about the Bible or your holy writings, you take your cultural experiences, you take your culture and you take your experience and you put it all together. In the middle, that forms your faith. So if I have different experiences from you, even though we're reading from the same book, I will interpret it differently because of my experiences. If I was one who was abandoned by my father as an infant, it may be difficult for me to see that God is a loving father because I've never experienced a loving father. By the same token, if I was a woman who was raped, it's very hard for me to view the Bible in the same way as someone who has never had that experience. And so we are shaped not only by our culture, the society in which we live in, we're shaped by our experiences. And so our faith is different because we have different experiences.
Yeah, and when I was watching when Al Sharpton gave a sermon, not political necessarily, but a sermon at your church, he talked about that New York Times writer. And he said, well, the Presbyterian church that I attend, we have more, subdued hymns and find it a more reflective times. And he said, well, maybe if you had a subdued life and you didn't have to put up with, you didn't have to count on the Lord to save you because the rent was due or you lost your job or your kids were being, whatever it was. We've had an intense life, so we worship God intensely.
Very intensely. And
if you've had a subdued and predictable life where everything has kind of gone along smoothly, and like one person said, the biggest anger of the suburbs is they ran out of khakis at the Gap. But if you've had that kind of life, maybe that would reflect on your worship differently.
And we don't apologize for our worship. We worship very demonstratively. We are expressive. We dance. We shout. We sing. And that doesn't mean that we're not intelligent. I've been to school for years to study and to exegete the Bible, and I am confident that I can understand and interpret the Bible with the best of them. But we express ourselves in a way that is unique to our culture.
No, I understand that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was going to bring this up after the break. I'll touch on it just a tad bit. Let's talk about the church and society right now. Do you think that the black church is as popular as it was, let's say, during my parents' time, during the Civil Rights Movement? Or do you think that African Americans are actually leaving the church?
I think Americans are leaving the church. I think that there is a movement toward this individualism, the confidence in our own achievements. I think that we as a country are moving away from God, and I don't think it's limited to the black church. As a matter of fact, many of the black churches are experiencing growth at this time. And we can also see it, especially in many of the immigrant churches, especially the Hispanic and Latino communities. Those churches are growing by leaps and bounds, and they are praising God on a level that hadn't been seen here in years, and so or decades. And so I don't think that the church is growing any smaller. I think that society is really dictating that we are becoming more independent of God in our own minds.
Do you think this recent downturn in the economy, like I opened the show with, some of the things that people were building their house on the sand, some of the things that people were counting on, has that rug's been pulled away? They're asking questions like, I know about 5 or 6 months ago, there seemed to be a rash of suicides when some of these, mutual fund companies and some of these things came to light. There was a guy, I remember there was a businessman in Germany, same thing, and it was like, wait a minute. It's not good if your net worth has gone down, but what were you really basing your life on to begin with? Do you think that there could be a silver lining to some of that from a spiritual point of view, that people are questioning, like, what I was counting on, the worth of my house, it's not as worth as much, there must be something more?
Yeah, I think that it also not only is there some spiritual significance about the economic times, but I also think that it challenges some of the theology that we have been putting out there. You have this prosperity theology says that if you don't have enough faith, your money will suffer. That's why you're suffering financially, you're suffering medically, you're suffering in your health and things of that nature because you don't have enough faith. Well, everybody is suffering financially, and I know that my grandmother had an incredible amount of faith, and she didn't have much money. My grandfather made this statement, and I thought it was just very, very funny. He said that many blacks in the South didn't know that there was a Great Depression. Nothing changed for them. And so
You know, that might be really true.
Yeah, well,
I mean, some of this angst I'm talking about could be more in the suburbs than in the community. I think you might hit on something there.
You think about it. He, you ask him about the Great Depression of the late 20s and the early 30s. He said, when? He said, the late 20s were like the early 20s and like the 40s for me. It was no different.
Yeah.
He said it was tough then. It was still tough. But I have seen an increase in attendance in churches across the country during this economic times when things that we thought were stable become unstable. We run to what we know.
Yeah.
And we look for some assurance that's stronger than the economy, something that's stronger than our 401k, something that's stronger than even our relationships in our homes. We have to run to something called a higher power, and for us, for me, it is the Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm not trying to force anyone else. You can be inspired by my faith, or you can be turned off by it. But it's my faith, and I'm going to share it.
Yeah, there was a guy named Pascal that said that all of us have a God-shaped void in our heart, and we might try and fill it with other stuff, but until we fill it with the Lord, it's just going to be empty. You could have a great, big, powerful blog like Al Robinson, and that could be something that you try and fill. You could be a successful pastor, but if you don't have that relationship with the Lord, then I think it's always going to kind of come up empty. I mean, there's a lot of stories about that. All right, we will be back with our guest, the Reverend Ivan Pitts, the senior pastor of New Hope Baptist Church here in Danbury, Connecticut. We want to have the website too, if we can do that, just to get. When are your services on Sunday morning?
8 o'clock and 11 o'clock.
8 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and they can come here. You preach.
They can come hear me.
All right, and admission is free.
Admission is free.
The plate will be passed, but admission is free.
The plate will be passed one time.
One time, okay.
But the admission is free.
8 o'clock.
And all are welcome.
All right, and the address again?
It's 10 Dr. Aaron Samuels Boulevard, right here in the beautiful city of Danbury.
All right, 114 years they've been preaching the gospel there. And you can come here, Reverend Ivan Pitts, every Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And I happen to know some people at your church. I happen to know your church. Guys like Cedric Rice, he's also the principal of Pathway Academies. Great guys like Troy Grant, who probably is the most eligible young man in Danbury.
Yeah.
He's handsome, he's intelligent, he's got a great sense of humor. Troy Grant, ladies, you want to remember that number and come on out to New Hope Baptist Church. We're going to take a break right now. We're going to have news and weather, and then we'll come back and finish up with Pastor Reverend Ivan Pitts. Let's go to the break.
Now, from the studios of Comcast Channel 23, this is a news update with anchors Austin Greenfield and Jim Masters. The latest news, sports, and weather from around the entire greater Danbury region. And now, Austin Greenfield and Jim Masters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of News and Weather on Ideas at Work and Beyond. I am weathercaster Austin Greenfield. Newscaster Jim Masters will give you the news. Jim, what's going on with the latest news?
Lots going on in the area. I appreciate that, Austin. In Danbury, a Danbury resident and a Newtown resident faced drug charges after police observed a suspected narcotics transaction Wednesday afternoon at Mill Ridge Plaza. Officers from the Community Conditions Unit charged Deshaun Middleton, 18, of Mill Plain Ridge Road, with possession of narcotics, possession of a controlled substance, and possession of both drugs with intent to sell near a public housing complex. Tyan McVeigh, 26, of Spring Trail in Sandy Hook, was charged with possession of narcotics and possession of narcotics near a public housing complex. Police say Middleton was carrying a quantity of cocaine and marijuana packaged for sale. In Brookfield, police charged a Canadian man with drunken driving after stopping him for an equipment violation early Wednesday. Robert Smith, 50, of Vancouver, Canada, was arrested after police saw him driving on Route 133 with a defective tail light shortly after 2:10 a.m. Smith was also cited for failure to display tail lights. In Bethel, police charged a 39-year-old town woman with fourth-degree larceny after an investigation into a theft of money from a neighbor. Kimberly Mitchell of Nashville Road allegedly took $900 from the neighbor's bedroom June 17th, according to police. And in Newtown, a Newtown emergency dispatcher who was fired in the fall was given his job back recently because of procedural error the town had made. The Connecticut State Board of Mediation and Arbitration ruled the grievant was not terminated for just cause as a result of procedural error. Jason Chicos worked for the town as an emergency personnel dispatcher from April 2002 until October 2008, when he was fired for failing to report to work on September 20th, 2008. Chicos was on a last chance agreement after a prior incident when he was accused of skipping work. He had swapped shifts with another employee, but there was a question as to whether or not he paid back the swap. The state board discovered the problem, and he worked September 27th, a day he was not scheduled to work. There's a disciplinary hearing scheduled for Chicos. That's the latest throughout the Danbury area, and let's take a look at that weather right now with Austin. It's been a little bit nicer than it has been over the last few days. Maybe we'll keep that rain away. Austin, how's it going to look?
Well, Jim, tomorrow should look fine. We could see a few showers during the day on Saturday into Saturday night, and then finally we're going to see a stretch of weather where we're not going to be seeing rain for at least every day or every other day. It seems like at least a few days we should be seeing some nice weather. Details on the forecast for tonight: some partly cloudy skies. We'll see lows on the chilly side around 53 degrees. For the day on Friday, mostly sunny skies, highs in the upper 70s. And then Saturday into Saturday night, another storm system coming on through. We should see some showers and thunderstorms later in the evening on Saturday, and then more showers Saturday night. High temperatures around 76 on Saturday. Low temperatures Saturday night should be around 59 degrees. Sunday we should return to mostly sunny skies. We'll see highs in the lower 80s. Monday and Tuesday should look nice. Mostly sunny to partly sunny skies with highs in the upper 70s. Then Wednesday and Thursday, another storm system should be coming through with some more showers and thunderstorms. We'll see highs in the upper 70s to near 80 degrees. Jim?
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate that. That's our report for Comcast Cable Channel 23. We appreciate your watching. We'll be back next week with more news and weather information. But stay tuned as Ideas at Work and Beyond with Marty Heiser continues right here on Comcast Cable Channel 23.
What is our phone? Welcome back to Ideas at Work and Beyond. Our phone number here is
792-4101.
792-4101. They're going to run it on the tape. 792-4101. If you have any questions for our guest, the Reverend Ivan Pitts, don't hesitate to call in. During the break, Reverend Pitts wasn't completely sure this was a live show, so please call in and let him know that this is a live show. We were talking before about tonight's topic is the history of the black church in America. See there, they're calling in already, so you know it's live. But I want to talk a little bit more about how did, like you said, you were the most unlikely person to become a pastor. How did you, find that this was your call? Okay.
Well, I think it was a process of progression. Mm-hmm. God he tricked me into this ministry. I was in education for a while, and then I went from education to volunteering as a youth pastor, and then I was employed as a youth pastor, and as I developed, next thing you know, I felt the calling. Others saw it in me well before I.
Now, you're originally from California?
Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how it happened. There's certain things that I wanted to. I kind of had to bargain with God, and we kind of negotiated. I said, "All right, God, if you want me to do this, I'll do what you asked me to do. But I don't want to be one who is void of a personality. I want to still have my humor, and I want to have fun doing it. I understand it's hard work. I understand it takes discipline and long hours, but I still want to have fun, and I enjoy doing what I do.
Have you ever seen Reverend Pitts preach?
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, it's an exciting time. It's an inspirational time, and I think that. Well, what I mean, if someone's out there, they're saying, all right, well, I'm watching this show, and Reverend Pitts seems like he's got a good idea, and they start the show talking about building your life on the rock and not on the sand and things like that. What does that really mean? What does that mean for an individual? I mean, let's take it out of the kind of theoretical, and what does that mean for someone right now if they're saying, look, I was sort of raised in the church, but I wandered away from it. What does it mean to have that relationship with Christ?
It is an inner strength. You quoted Al Sharpton, and I'll tell a story that Al Sharpton shared some years ago. He talked about there was this doll, this kind of blow-up doll, and that you could hit it and it would fall down, but every time it fell down it would come back up. You could kick it, whatever you do to it, it would fall down, but it would always come back up. And one little boy who was hitting this doll, this blow-up doll, he could not figure out why this doll would always come back up. And so he said, I looked around the outside, I felt around the top, I picked it up and I looked under the bottom. There must be something on the inside that allows it to be hit and kicked, and it always comes back up. That's what a relationship with God is. That's what a relationship with Jesus Christ is the ability to put something on the inside of you that will sustain you as life kicks you, as life beats you up and you get knocked down, and you always have the ability to stand back up. That is our history, that is our culture, not just African Americans, but people who have faith. They are able to get back up.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to drift off from that topic, but we have now like mega churches now. Up in Hartford, after my family moved from Tennessee up to Hartford, one of the first churches I went to was First Baptist Church in Hartford. Now it's First Cathedral Church, and it is huge. I mean, it's big. What do you think about mega churches?
I think mega churches can do mega good. If you have 500 members, you're able to serve a certain number of people with that membership. If you have 5,000 members, you're able to do more. Let me give you an example. There's a church in Dallas, Texas that asks each member once a month to bring in one item of food for their food pantry. So think about it. When you're in a grocery store, your job is to bring once a month a can of peas, or maybe it's a frozen chicken, or maybe it's a gallon of milk, or whatever it may be, once a month. So if your total food bill is $300 a month, now it's $302. But you multiply that by 5,000 people. In a city like Dallas or Chicago or Los Angeles, you make a huge impact. So I don't have a problem with mega churches because they can do mega ministry and do a mega good. I do have a problem with ministers who are opulent, who are over the top. I would never be able to understand why a minister would need 4 jets.
Right.
That kind of a thing.
One is sufficient.
Sure,
you really don't need one.
Just you only need one. That's
right. Yeah. Why? Do you have some thoughts on mega churches? And
Well,
you feel uncomfortable in them? You feel like they're impersonal?
Personally, there's good and there's not so good. I guess one of the things I feel is maybe it's not so good. Maybe it's just me. Is that you don't. I come from a small church. You get that community setting within a small church. You feel like you're part of a family in a small church. It's very intimate, very close. A mega church, you feel like, you're just an individual. I mean, for me personally, you don't feel a community setting because it's just so incredibly big. It's like, how can that minister or how can that pastor really know me? Because I'm just one out of thousands of people in this congregation here.
Right.
And I kind of lose the intimate setting when I'm in a mega church. That's just me personally. Other people might feel differently, but that's just my personal opinion. That's just something that I feel, and I heard from other people as well.
Well,
I don't know.
That's why there's so many different churches, so many different sizes, so many different, if you will, flavors.
Right.
Everyone doesn't like chocolate ice cream. Some people like vanilla. I personally like chocolate chip. And that doesn't make me right or wrong. It's just what I prefer.
Well, what for New Hope Baptist Church? What you just had a building project, right? A couple of years back now.
We're still in the
still
midst
in the
of it,
middle.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're a growing congregation. Do you have what are the dreams and aspirations for the church? Do you have a goal in mind as far as attendance and what you want to be about?
Well, if we are a living, breathing organism, a healthy organism grows. So I do expect for us to grow over time. But our real focus is being an impact, a blessing in this community. I'm greatly disturbed. We have a food pantry that we share through CACD, and the numbers of people who are lining up for food is just disturbing and alarming. And so in the times of economic uncertainty, that's when we need people to give the most, because the need is so high. We had just a few weeks ago, we had a special resume writing workshop. Some of the HR professionals in our church wanted to look at the resumes of people, because we know that you have to have a good resume in order to be seen. You can't get an interview if you don't have a good resume. And so we looked at people's resumes so that we can make sure that they have the best chance of getting an interview. And so the next workshop we're going to have is interviewing skills and making sure that you're dressed appropriately and understand how to answer questions. So those are the needs that are out there, and we try to address the needs. And we don't care what color you are, we don't care how tall you are, how thin or thick you are. If you are in need, you are welcome at New Hope Baptist Church. If I can just go a little further, there was a couple here.
They had the church phone number on TV too. So is that where people can get in touch with you?
You can call. We have an incredible staff that's there Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and sometimes you can catch us in the evenings. But there was a couple here that moved here from the northeast, or the more northeast. I think it was Maine. They came here looking for employment, and they weren't able to find it. It was a white couple, and they went to one local agency to try to get help because they wanted to move back home. They just didn't have the resources to get back home because it didn't work out for them there. And that agency said, you should go to New Hope Baptist Church. They have a reputation for helping people. And they came, and we helped them. And they wrote us a beautiful letter at the end of this when they got back, and they said, when we realized it was a black church, we didn't think you were going to help us. And we thank God that you did. And so to some degree it was wonderful, but it was also shocking, because Jesus would never discriminate based upon color or race or any other kind of affiliation. We are historically a black church, but we are a Church of Jesus Christ, and any church that is limited to a particular group fails to be a church of God.
No, I couldn't agree more. I attend Walnut Hill Community Church, and we want to be integrated, and we partner with New Hope Baptist Church quite a bit. That's where I saw you speak, and I think it's just a beautiful partnership. I do think it's been said that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America, and I'm sure that's not by design. I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but I don't know. We're kind of doing everything we can to, get together.
I think those lines of segregation and separation are slowly but surely beginning to thin as we do things with Walnut Hill, and we also do activities with Faith Church on Tuesday nights, and we interact with the Brazilian Church. Those lines become less distinct.
There's a verse in the Bible that says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, and that by this all men will know that you are my disciples, that you have love one for another. And I think that that's a real testimony to the world, where they see, a white family from Maine that's down on their luck and needs bus fare back home, and they come to the Good Samaritan, New Hope Baptist Church, which is primarily an African-American church, and they receive hope. People recognize that. There's something different about that church. There's something different, the way they love one another. This isn't just, like I was saying earlier, the Rotary Club or a town softball league. You know, there's something different about those people. They really do care. And that's the difference that having a relationship with Christ makes. I mean, I really, you know, when I became a Christian, it was through an organization called Young Life, which I know you're familiar with, Troy Grant and them, back in Illinois. And the one thing, I was a freshman in high school, I'd been raised in the church, but I'd never really made that decision for myself.
Right.
You know, Christianity to me was just sort of a religion, you know, like a do's and don'ts and go to church and be nice to your mother. But I never knew that you could have this personal relationship with Christ. But there were these group of Young Life leaders, and they were just Christians, and they really loved one another. I could tell there was something about their relationship, the way they hung out together, the things they did, the way they appreciated each other, and they weren't tearing each other down or trying to, you know, say, oh, he's got better clothes than me, or, you know, what. They really loved one another. And I said, what do they got? And then I learned that it was, you know, having this relationship with Christ. And I think that as a church, you know, black community, white community, we need to be manifesting that. I mean, it used to be, if there was an unwanted child, where did they take that baby? The steps of the church.
Oh, the church.
The church.
Right.
They used to take, you know, if there was an unwanted baby, they would take them to the steps of the church because they knew the church would take care of it. I mean, this goes all the way back to the first century in Roman cultures, the early church in Roman societies. If there was an unwanted child, they used to just leave the child out. I mean, I'm talking about a little baby, and let it die of exposure if it was weak or diseased or malformed or something. And here come the Christians. They come scoop up these babies and take care of them. I mean, you see something similar like that with some of the adoption agencies that they have in China and things like that. You know, where girl babies in China aren't as desirable. And so here comes the Christian church. But I think that needs to be the testimony, whether it's the black church or the white church, you know, that needs to be the testimony.
I think before we are a black church, before we are a white church, before we are a Cambodian church, before a Brazilian church, we're a Christian church. And we're marked by our love. And then all the other lines of identity are secondary. Love first.
I agree.
And all the other stuff is secondary.
Yeah, I agree. There's that bond. Yeah.
We have a lot of problems in our society, ranging from teenage pregnancy, single parents, drugs, crime. Where does the church fit in terms of addressing those social problems that are happening in our area?
Again, I think that we are a voice for the voiceless. You know, Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19 says that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He has anointed me to really give sight to those who are blind, those who can't hear, allow them to hear, and to be a voice for the voiceless. So we have to question, and we have to be a voice for those who are not being treated equally in the criminal justice system, those who are not being treated equally in the medical rooms, those who are not being treated equally in the classrooms. It is amazing to me that our children can matriculate through 12 years of school and graduate with a high school diploma and still read at a third grade level. I think that is atrocious. I think that is an abomination. And I don't think that is a race issue. I think that is affecting everybody. I think that's a quality of life issue. And so it doesn't matter what color the person is, that is an abomination, and we have to speak out against that. We also have to speak out against the fact that certain illnesses are more prevalent in certain communities. You have to ask the question, why? You know, why is asthma so high in certain communities, and so forth and so on. You have to ask those questions, and not only ask those questions, but demand to hold someone accountable who has the ability and the power to do something about that.
I think one of the things that concerns me a lot is our youth and our young kids who are out there in gang violence, drugs, teenage pregnancy, and I would just, I know that the church is a place that can help in those areas. It's just somehow we need to reach out, find a way to grab those kids and say, hey, look, you know, you can come to the church for guidance, because those kids that are out there wilding out there in the streets, sometimes don't have a father at home, sometimes don't have a mother at home, or they might have a mother and father who are not involved in their lives. And that's where I think the church can come in and fill in that void. You know,
if you're familiar, we had Bill Beatty on the show before with Pathways Academy, and they have a mentoring program that's trying to address that thing. 'Cause the young adolescent male minority is really in peril, because they don't have proper male role models. They don't have a daddy at home who they see getting up every day and going to work, and that's what it means to be a man. You provide for your family, you provide for your kids. So they have this idea, well, what does it mean to be a man? And I think some of the things you see in the arts, like gangster rap and this hyper masculine kind of attitude and guns and violence and stuff like that, they think, well, that's kind of what it means to be a man, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't. Being a man is living up to your responsibilities, providing for your family, holding down a job. And so I think that...
And on top of that, you're touching on videos and stuff, which is even worse, which really drives me crazy, is the degrading of women in hip-hop videos, because they see that image on TV. It's like, oh, it's okay to treat a woman like that. No, it isn't.
Yeah, and that's why, again, we've done a couple shows now on Barack Obama. My sense is that on a cultural level, on a political level, but just as a society, that kind of reboots the whole thing. Because hopefully the next generation of young kids, and I'm not just talking about African Americans, but others, are saying, that guy's got it together. And you're right, he was elected. I mean, Iowa is 98% Caucasian. Right. The man won the primary, the man won the general election in Iowa. Okay? So it's not about black or white. But you can say that, well, there's a African American role model where this guy went to school, stayed in school, played by the rules, and he's aspired to the highest position in the land. Now, you may have questions about his policies. We'll see how it all works out. There's some issues, but I think it's nothing but a benefit to the minority community here, because you have that, and you can hold him up as a role model, like this is the way to do it.
And also, I think that I don't like using the classic examples as excuses for not striving to be all that you can be. Barack Obama didn't have a father. And so that was an excuse for him to be, mediocre. His mother died. All the classic things. He was on welfare. All the classic things that we kind of label as at risk or risk factors. He had many of those, and we can no longer use those things as excuses. We have to be successful and excellent regardless of what our socioeconomic status is. I think also the role of the church is to tell the truth. We have to do some truth telling. We have to fight myths and tell the truth. For example, you mentioned rap music. Rap music, in its inception, in its origin, is very, very positive. It was the poor kids of the Bronx and of Queens speaking out against social injustices. They rapped about what they saw. They rapped about the fact that on their basketball courts there were broken glass. And why is it that they had to have broken glass when they're playing basketball? Why do they see drugs in the street and things of that nature? Why are they taking the arts away from their high school programs? And they would speak out against injustice, and that's the origin of rap music. They were creative poets that would see things that were unjust and would rhythmically speak out against those things. And so rap music in its origin is not bad. Now this garbage that we hear now is pretty bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't indict the whole that form of music. I mean, it's interesting because some of the best hymns that we have in the church right now were originally bar songs back in like England 200 years ago. So the whole thing, I mean, all you got to say is someone like Kurt Franklin or someone that are taking that form of music, hip hop music, and using it in a positive way. What I'm talking about is some of the the violence that you see. Tupac Shakur, Biggie Small, some of the actual shootings that have happened and have been motivated by some of this. That's what I'm talking about.
And I also think that again, we have to tell the truth. There's a rapper by the name of 50 Cent who brags about the fact that he has 5 bullets in him and that he grew up in in a hood. Well, he doesn't live in that hood anymore. You know, he raps about a place that he doesn't live. He raps about a place that he can't even go to. And while we're believing that he's this hardcore thug that lives in this neighborhood, he has millions of dollars living in one of the best communities in the world. And so, you know, again, we have to kind of open people's eyes to the truth.
And I like what you're saying about not having an excuse. You can't have an excuse because no one cares, really. You know, you're like, hey, society's to blame for this. You know, I couldn't do any better. You know, no one cares. Why don't you show me you can show up to work on time? Why don't you show me you can, you know, get through high school and hand in your homework and do your writing? You know, no, the time for excuses is over. You know,
it was ingrained in me by my mother. No excuses. She never said no excuses, but her life was no excuses. At the age of 42, she goes to college. It takes her 6 years to graduate. She graduates with a 2.1 GPA, but she graduates. It was difficult for her. She worked in the daytime, and she went to school at night. She cleaned people's homes in the summertime, and no excuses. And, you know, she retired a couple years ago as a certified teacher, making very good money, and now she's living okay because there were no excuses. And so she made no excuses, so I have no excuses.
All right. Well, this evening we have been privileged to have the senior pastor of New Hope Baptist Church right here in Danbury. Services at 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock every Sunday. Every Sunday. The Reverend Ivan Pitts has been our guest, and I just want to thank you very much for appearing on the show. Really appreciate it.
It was an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Al, thank you for finally getting this legendary minister here on the show. We really appreciate it.
Infamous.
Join us next week. There are going to be a series of shows coming up here that you're going to be putting together, so there's going to be some exciting shows.
It'll be interesting.
Also, check out Hat City Blog to see what local politician Al Robinson is giving, you know, hell to lately. That's a tough blog. And again, New Hope Baptist Church. Come join the fellowship. See what they're talking about. What it means to be a Christian. The services are at 8 and 11 o'clock. Google it, and you'll see where it's at. But Reverend Ivan Pitts has been our guest. Join us next week for Ideas at Work and Beyond. Thanks for joining us.